At 5:17 a.m. on the morning after our wedding, my husband tried 3 times to fit his key into the lock of my waterfront penthouse. The storm had finally moved past Seattle, leaving the hallway windows pale with early light. Daniel's tuxedo was wrinkled, his hair was still damp, and the collar of his shirt carried a faint lipstick stain he had either forgotten or been too tired to notice. He smelled of hotel soap, whiskey, rain, and a perfume I had never worn. He stood outside for several seconds, probably rehearsing what he would say. I knew Daniel. He expected tears. He expected accusations. Then he expected me to soften when he lowered his voice and told me I had misunderstood. But the moment he opened the door, every word disappeared from his face. The white roses from the wedding were gone. The gold letters that had spelled our forever had been removed from the living room wall. His 2 suitcases stood beside the entrance, neatly packed. My attorney sat on the sofa with a sealed document envelope on the table. My chief of staff stood near the windows. A private security officer waited by the door. And I sat across from them in a black suit, my hands folded over the child growing inside me. Daniel stared at the room, then at me. Emma, he said. I can explain. I'm sure you can. I nodded toward the empty chair. Sit down. You made your final choice last night. Now I'm making mine. 36 hours earlier, I had still been hoping I was wrong about him. Daniel and I had been together for 3 years. He knew me as Emma Bennett, a strategist at a mid-sized branding firm. He did not know that Bennett was my mother's maiden name, or that Hartwell Capital, the private investment group that owned a major stake in his company, was controlled by my family trust. Almost no one knew what I looked like. I avoided interviews, rarely attended public events, and conducted most investment meetings through representatives. In business filings, I appeared as E. Hart. I had not hidden my identity because I wanted to play a game with ordinary people. I had done it because the last man I almost married had loved my family name far more than he had ever loved me. 5 years earlier, my former fiancé had been charming, polished, and relentlessly attentive. Then he learned how much control I would inherit over the Hartwell Trust. Within months, he was trying to manage my investments, isolate me from advisors, and persuade me to give him access to accounts he had no reason to touch. When I ended that engagement, I promised myself that the next man in my life would meet me before he met my money. Daniel did. He was a project manager when I joined the firm. On my first week, he stepped between me and a client who was screaming because a presentation file had corrupted. When my supervisor buried my proposal, Daniel stayed until 3 in the morning helping me rebuild it. When migraines sent me home in the dark, he drove me across the city and waited until I had locked my door. Those early kindnesses did not feel calculated. Even now, after everything, I believe some of them were real. We started dating 6 months after we met. Daniel remembered that I was allergic to peanuts. He knew I hated crowded restaurants and loved old bookstores. When Seattle froze under an unexpected snowstorm, he drove an hour to bring me groceries because he thought I might be too stubborn to ask for help. Slowly, I trusted him. And slowly, without telling him, I helped him. I never ordered anyone to promote him. I never bought him a title. But when Hartwell Capital asked the firm's executives to identify younger managers with potential, I made sure Daniel's proposals were reviewed. When a major client needed a new team, I suggested the department he worked in. He earned some of the opportunities. He worked hard once they were placed in front of him. But as his salary and status grew, something in him changed. He stopped saying we were building a future together and started saying he was building one for me. He joked that my small paycheck was cute. He told friends I had been lucky to meet him before he became successful. He began suggesting that after marriage I should leave my job, handle the home, and let him make the financial decisions. Whenever I pushed back, he smiled as if I were being difficult. "Why do you need your own account?" he once asked. "We're going to be husband and wife. If you trust me, there shouldn't be his money and her money." I told myself it was insecurity. I told myself he came from a family where the man was expected to control the finances. I told myself love required patience. Then, 1 month before the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. I sat alone in my car outside the clinic, holding the test results with both hands. I was frightened, but beneath the fear was a quiet happiness. I pictured Daniel's face when I told him. I imagined taking him to Hartwell Capital after the wedding and finally explaining everything. I thought I was about to give him two extraordinary pieces of news, that we were having a child, and that neither of us would ever have to worry about financial security. That night, Daniel used my tablet to update our wedding guest list. He signed into his cloud account and forgot to log out. At 1:14 a.m., the screen lit up on the nightstand. A message appeared from a woman named Claire Morgan. Once Emma puts you on the deed, we can take out the home equity loan. You promised me you'd leave her as soon as the money clears. For several seconds, I could not breathe. Claire was Daniel's college girlfriend. According to him, they had ended things years earlier when she moved to London. He had always described her as part of a past that no longer mattered. I did not search through his account. I did not open the conversation. I photographed the message exactly as it had appeared and called my attorney the next morning. She told me the tablet belonged to me and the notification had appeared on a device Daniel had voluntarily connected. Even so, she advised me not to dig further. We preserved what I had already seen and began examining the financial plan referenced in the message. What we found was worse than an affair. Daniel had spoken to a mortgage broker and claimed that after the wedding I would add him to the deed of my penthouse. He had asked how quickly a newly added spouse could apply for a home equity line of credit. He had also told Claire that I intended to invest $250,000 in a consulting company he planned to launch. I had never agreed to any such investment. Then Hartwell Capital ordered an independent review of several vendors connected to Daniel's department. I removed myself from the process to avoid contaminating the investigation. An outside audit firm found inflated invoices, questionable reimbursements, and payments flowing from one contractor into an account linked to Daniel. The money was not enough to make him rich. It was enough to prove he had begun stealing long before he thought he had access to my assets. I sat in my attorney's office with the medical report in one hand and the audit summary in the other. "Cancel the wedding," she told me. Technically, Daniel and I were already married. 6 days earlier, we had signed our civil marriage documents at a small courthouse ceremony. The hotel event was meant to be the public celebration for family, friends, and business associates. I should have ended everything that afternoon. But I needed time to protect my property, secure the audit records, and prevent Daniel from transferring money or destroying company evidence. And if I am honest, I wanted to give him one final chance. I told myself that if he confessed before the ceremony, if he admitted Claire was still in his life, if he told me about the loan plan, if he showed one moment of genuine remorse, I might at least believe the man I had loved had not been false from beginning to end. He did not confess. The day before the wedding, Daniel sat in my living room pretending to review the ceremony schedule while repeatedly silencing his phone. "After the wedding, we should go to the bank and combine everything," he said. "It will make life easier." "Everything?" I asked. "Our income, savings, credit, the usual things married people do." "And the penthouse?" His expression sharpened for half a second. "We should add my name to the deed. It will help with taxes and future financing. Besides, we're already married. Does it matter whose name is on a piece of paper? Are you sure convenience is the only reason?" Daniel smiled and kissed my forehead. "Emma, everything I do is for our future." That was the moment the last piece of hope inside me went quiet. On the morning of our wedding celebration, rain covered Seattle in a gray sheet. The ceremony was held at a luxury hotel overlooking Elliott Bay. White roses lined the aisle. Glass walls framed the dark water, and hundreds of tiny lights reflected against the storm clouds. Daniel had invited every executive, client, college friend, and distant relative he wanted to impress. He believed the important investors in the room had come because his career was rising. He did not know they had come because the invitation carried Hartwell Capital's name. 10 minutes before the ceremony, I stood alone in the bridal suite and looked at Claire's flight information. She was landing at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport at 8 that evening. The latest message preserved by my attorney had come that morning. "If you don't pick me up tonight, I'll know you never meant to leave her." Daniel had answered, "No matter what happens, I'll be there." I set the phone down. Then I took off my wedding dress. I changed into a fitted black suit, removed my veil, and left the white gown hanging in front of the mirror. Outside, the music began. The host announced the bride. No one appeared at the end of the aisle. The applause weakened, then stopped. Guests turned in their seats. Daniel stood beneath the floral arch, smiling too widely as he stared toward the closed doors. The host tried again. Still, I did not come. Daniel called me 5 times. I watched the screen light up without answering. When the host began a third awkward attempt to explain the delay, the side doors opened. I walked into the ballroom without a veil, bouquet, or escort. My attorney and another lawyer followed, several steps behind me. The first people to stand were 2 members of Hartwell Capital's advisory board. "Miss Hart," one of them said. The name moved through the room in a whisper. Daniel stared at me from the stage. I watched confusion become recognition and recognition become fear. His chief executive hurried forward and shook my hand. Several investors nodded in greeting. Daniel's face lost its color. "Emma," he said into the microphone. "Why are they calling you Miss Hart?" I stopped in the center of the aisle. Because Bennett was my mother's name. Hartwell Capital belongs to my family, and I control the voting trust. The room became so quiet that the rain against the windows sounded like static. Daniel's mother sat in the second row with her mouth open. Earlier that morning, I had heard her tell relatives that I was fortunate Daniel had agreed to marry a woman with an unimpressive career and no important family connections. Daniel stepped down from the stage. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I plan to tell you today," I said. "Along with the fact that I'm pregnant." A wave of shocked murmurs moved through the ballroom. Daniel's eyes widened. For 1 second, I saw joy. Then I saw calculation. He was not thinking about becoming a father. He was calculating how much he had almost gained and how much he might still save. "Emma, let's go somewhere private," he said. "We don't need to discuss this in front of everyone. You didn't need privacy when you told a mortgage broker you would own half my home. You didn't need privacy when you promised Claire $250,000 from an investment I never agreed to make." Daniel stopped moving. My attorney gave a signal to the hotel technician. The ballroom screen came on. There were no intimate photographs. No hotel footage. No private images. Only documents that had been reviewed and approved for disclosure. The first was Daniel's email to the mortgage broker, describing his plan to obtain an ownership interest in my penthouse and borrow against it immediately after the wedding. The second was a limited extract of messages in which he and Claire discussed taking the money, ending the marriage, and leaving Seattle. The third was a timeline from the independent audit showing inflated vendor payments and suspected kickbacks. Every unnecessary name, account number, and private detail had been removed. What remained was the plan. Daniel looked at the screen as though he were watching his own execution. "It's not what you think," he said. "Then tell me what it is." "Claire is unstable." I was trying to calm her down. "I only asked the broker questions. I never took out a loan. And those vendor payments have nothing to do with me. The audit wasn't conducted by me," I said. "Your company hired an outside firm. The report went to the board this morning." Daniel turned toward his CEO. The man did not look away. "Effective immediately, you're suspended," he said. "Your system access has been disabled. The audit materials will be turned over to law enforcement. From this point forward, communication goes through counsel." Daniel swayed slightly. For the first time, he understood that I had not used my wealth to invent consequences for him. His own emails, approvals, accounts, and signatures had done that. He came toward me. "We're already married. You can't end our marriage because of a few messages. 6 days of marriage do not turn fraud into commitment," I said. "My attorney is filing to dissolve the marriage and preserve my separate property. The penthouse was mine before we met. Your name was never added to the deed. No joint account was opened. No investment was transferred." His lips parted, but no sound came out. He had believed the wedding would make him wealthy. Now he knew he was leaving with less than he had brought into the relationship. "What about the baby?" he asked. "That's my child. Biologically, yes. I won't lie about that. But fatherhood is not an identity you use when it gives you leverage. Custody, support, and access will be decided through the proper legal process. His mother rushed into the aisle. "You knew all this and still let us come here," she shouted. "You humiliated our family. A woman like you is never good enough for my son." Several guests gasped. I looked at her for a long moment. "Then you should be relieved," I said. "I'm making sure I never become part of your family." Hotel security approached and asked her to leave. Daniel did not defend her. He was still staring at me as if another expression might change what had happened. When I walked past him, he caught my wrist. "I can end things with Claire. I can return the money. Emma, I made mistakes, but you can't throw away 3 years." I looked down at his hand until he released me. "I didn't throw away 3 years," I said. "You treated my trust like an asset you could cash out." Then I left the ballroom. Outside, the rain had become a violent downpour. Daniel stayed at the hotel for hours. His friends avoided him. Coworkers stopped answering his calls. His company phone and badge were remotely disabled. He sent me message after message, first explanations, then apologies, then accusations that I had deceived him by hiding who I was. I answered none of them. At 7:20 that evening, Claire called him again. Daniel was sitting alone in the hotel bar with 3 empty whiskey glasses in front of him. Later, his attorney would obtain the call records. I never heard the conversation, but Daniel eventually described it during a deposition. "You're still coming, aren't you?" Claire had asked. "The wedding is over. I may have lost my job." After a pause, she said, "Then you need me more than ever." "At least I'm still here." Daniel had a choice. He could call a lawyer. He could cooperate with the audit. He could go home and wait until I decided whether I was willing to speak with him. Instead, he picked up his car keys and drove through flooded roads toward the airport. At 8:07 p.m., he met Claire outside International Arrivals. She ran into his arms under the awning while rain blew sideways across the pickup lane. The first question she asked was not whether he was all right. She asked, "Can you still get the money?" They argued in the car. Claire accused him of ruining the plan. Daniel blamed her for returning on the wedding day and forcing him to choose. But neither of them was willing to be alone with the disaster they had created. They checked into a hotel near the airport. Not because their love had survived everything, but because both of them were afraid to admit they had burned down their lives for a future that had never existed. At 4:36 in the morning, Daniel saw the email from my attorney. "Please collect the personal property you had not yet moved into Ms. Hart's residence. After 9 a.m., all communication must go through counsel." He left the hotel immediately. That was how he ended up standing inside my penthouse at 5:17 a.m., looking at his packed suitcases and the legal envelope on my coffee table. My attorney slid the envelope toward him. "This contains the petition to dissolve the marriage, a notice preserving Ms. Hart's separate property, and a formal demand that you stop contacting her directly." Daniel ignored her. "Did you have someone follow me?" he asked me. "An investigator documented your movements in public places," I said. "No one entered your room. No one recorded your calls. We didn't need to know what happened behind the hotel door. You left our wedding celebration and drove through a dangerous storm to pick up the woman you planned to leave me for. That was enough. I only took her to a hotel." I looked at his crushed shirt, the lipstick near his collar, and the exhaustion in his face. "You don't need to explain anymore." His shame turned into anger. "You tested me from the beginning," he said. "You let me believe you had nothing. You watched me struggle while you could have given me everything with one phone call." I listened without interrupting. "You're right about one thing," I said when he finished. "I hid part of my life. Fear made me believe secrecy could protect me from being used. That was not a healthy foundation for a marriage, and I will take responsibility for it." Hope flashed across his face. "Then we both made mistakes. We can start again." They were not the same mistake. The hope vanished. "I hid my surname and my wealth. I did not steal from your company. I did not plan to borrow against your home. I did not promise another man I would take your money and leave you after the wedding." I leaned forward. "You didn't lose me because I was rich, Daniel. You lost me because you believed loving you made me easy to exploit." His eyes filled with tears. "The baby needs a father. The baby needs safety, honesty, and stability. If a court later decides you are capable of participating in his life, I will follow the order. But you will not use our child to reach me, my home, or my money. He looked at my stomach, and for a moment the performance fell away. I did love you, he said quietly. I believed that he believed it. Maybe he had loved me in the only way he knew how, until ambition, entitlement, and greed became more important. Maybe you did, I said. That's why this hurts. That answer broke him more completely than anger would have. He picked up his suitcases. At the door, he turned around as if waiting for me to stop him. I lowered my eyes to the documents in front of me. He left. When the door closed, the strength went out of my shoulders. I pressed both hands over my stomach and cried silently into the black fabric of my suit. No one told me I was powerful. No one congratulated me for winning. My attorney simply sat beside me until I could breathe again. If I had told him the truth sooner, I whispered, maybe none of this would have happened. The timing might have changed, she said. His choices would still have belonged to him. I knew leaving Daniel would not instantly heal me. I still had to face pregnancy, a public breakup, a criminal investigation connected to my company, and the humiliation of admitting that I had ignored warning signs because I wanted the relationship to be real. But for the first time, I stopped explaining evidence away to protect the man who had created it. 2 months later, the independent audit was completed. Daniel was charged in connection with commercial kickbacks and fraudulent reimbursements. The case did not exist because I had demanded revenge. It was built from bank records, vendor testimony, signed approvals, and the findings of an outside forensic accounting firm. Claire was not criminally charged, but her messages about the property scheme became evidence in the divorce proceedings. Once she understood that Daniel would never gain access to the penthouse or investment money, she left Seattle. Daniel offered to settle. Through his attorney, he asked me to withdraw the fraud allegations in the marriage case and to ask the company not to pursue its civil claims. I refused. I did not post private photographs online. I did not give interviews to gossip channels. When clips from the ballroom spread through social media, I released one statement. My private relationship will be handled by the family court. Corporate matters are being handled by independent auditors and the appropriate authorities. I will not comment further. That restraint mattered. The story was no longer about a wealthy bride humiliating an unsuccessful groom. It became what it had always been, a man attempting to turn marriage into a planned transfer of property. My father flew from Boston to Seattle the week after the wedding. He did not ask why I had failed to see Daniel clearly. He did not lecture me about the danger of hiding my identity. He held me and said, "You don't have to keep proving that nothing can hurt you." That night, I finally cried in front of my family. During my pregnancy, I began seeing a therapist. I had spent years confusing independence with never needing help. I had believed that if I controlled every detail, no one could betray me again. But real independence was not isolation. It was the ability to ask for support, to tell the truth, and to leave when a relationship required me to become smaller in order to survive it. 7 months later, I gave birth to a healthy boy and named him Noah. The family court formally established Daniel's paternity. Because he was facing criminal proceedings, had been absent throughout most of the pregnancy, and had repeatedly tried to contact me through third parties, I received primary custody and authority over medical and educational decisions. The court did not erase him from Noah's life. It required Daniel to complete parenting classes and a psychological evaluation before he could request supervised visitation. I did not tell my son that he had no father. I also refused to make him a weapon in an adult conflict. I decided only that, until Noah was old enough to understand the truth, I would not allow Daniel's lies to become part of his childhood. 18 months after the storm, Seattle gave us one of its rare clear spring mornings. The cherry trees at the University of Washington were in full bloom. I pushed Noah beneath the branches while my father and my best friend followed with a picnic blanket and a bag filled with bottles, snacks, and far too many baby clothes. Noah woke and reached toward a petal resting on the edge of his stroller. I placed it in his palm. During that year, I returned to Hartwell Capital and helped build stronger reporting systems for employees who suspected fraud or financial abuse. I also funded a small legal program for people experiencing economic control, marriage fraud, and workplace retaliation. I did not present myself as a perfect survivor. Money had not protected me from grief. Intelligence had not prevented me from ignoring what I did not want to see. Power had not made childbirth, loneliness, or betrayal easier. What changed me was not watching Daniel lose his job or face criminal consequences. It was learning that I did not have to hide my voice, reduce my life, or tolerate fear in order to prove I was worthy of love. A friend once asked whether I would ever trust someone enough to fall in love again. I thought about it for a long time. Yes, I said. But next time, I won't use secrets to test someone, and I won't use self-sacrifice to prove loyalty. A breeze moved through the trees, and pale petals fell across my shoulders. Noah laughed from his stroller. I looked up at the clear sky and realized the storm was finally over. My new life did not begin when a better man appeared. It began at 5:17 that morning, when I left the wrong man outside the future he had tried to steal, and chose, for the first time, not to betray myself.